All right, so good evening, everyone. Hope we are all having a good day. We'll proceed with our class, and then hopefully others can join as we go along. So we've already seen some things with programming. We've seen functions, data structures, loops, and variables, and all of this will help us to be able to write nice programming Python scripts. So today we're going to continue looking at some functions, and then hopefully if we still have time we'll also talk about strings. Okay, so this is an example of a function. So last week we saw how to write user-defined functions. Okay, so here we have a user-defined function called rect area, and we have our parameters, and if you want to supply a default argument, this is how you do it. You can assign a value to it, just like you see here with width equals 10, so that when you're calling this function somewhere else in your code, like you see here, we are fine with just supplying the length. So you can also supply the width, but if you choose not to supply the width, this function still gets called because the width is set to 10 as default. Okay, so this is how you pass default arguments in Python to a Python function. Okay, so rect area is going to calculate the area of a rectangle with two variables, length and width, and then we also print the area. But if you don't supply the width, this function still works because you set the default of width to 10. Okay, so this is how you do it. You can have a situation where you have several arguments that will have a default value, and when you have such a situation, you want to make sure that the ones that are not default stay to the left of all those that are default. So if we're adding another one, so if we are adding another one here, like you see, this is for calculating the volume of a cuboid. Okay, so width here is already a default argument. If we are adding another one called height, it has to be to the right of width. Okay, so you will not put width equals 10, then length, then height equals 5, or width equals 10, height equals 5, then length at the end. No, you want the non-default ones to be on your left, and then the default ones will be on your right. Okay, so this function cuboid volume is going to calculate the volume of a cuboid shape, and it will use the length. We've set the default width to 10 and the default height to 5. So if you choose, you can just call cuboid volume and just pass the height. Okay, so when you run this program with just the height, it will use the default width and the default height. So if you run this program with just the length, it will use the default width and the default height to calculate the volume. You may also pass the width and height as well when you call this function if you want. So it will almost be like it's optional for those parameters or arguments. Okay, so This here is a bad practice. This would give you an error, just like I was saying before. Your non-default argument should always come before your default argument. So you can try this code and you will see the error that you get. Okay. Alright, so you will likely get an error like this saying non-default arguments follows default argument, just to remind you that this length ought to come before the width and the height because this is non-default. So your default arguments are always to your right, your non-default arguments are to your left, and that's how this works in Python. Alright, so we have another type of function here. This time you see that we've defined the function like we are used to, okay? But when you are calling the function, you may choose to do it in such a manner. So you see here first name equals, and then I pass the first name. So before you would have seen that I'll just say greet, then I'll put in string Sam, comma, and then another string Paul. But you can see here that we are almost using the arguments as if this is a key, right? So we call this keyword arguments. So first name equals, and then you pass the first name, then surname equals, you pass the surname. When you run this, you get this type of message. Now, because you use keyword arguments, you may also swap the positions of the arguments, so it will not matter what comes before the other. Okay, so you can say surname first and then first name after with this type of call, just like you see in the function. We have first name and surname. Okay, so it will know what belongs to what when you assign it like this. Okay, so you can also decide that you only refer to one of them as a keyword argument. So in this case, surname equals Paul, and then you just pass Sam like you usually do. So I'll have to correct this. There's supposed to be a quotation here. Okay, so when you pass Sam and then surname equals Paul, you should still get the same type of greeting. Okay, but you see here you get an error because if you pass it like this, this is first name and you're also assigning first name again, right? So it will give you an error. So if you don't pass any keyword here, it's going to assume that this is first name. So if it knows that this Paul here is already a first name, and then you try to assign something else as a first name, it should give you an error because you are having two values now as first name, and then you've not passed anything for the surname. So this type of function call will give you an error. Good. So this is what we are used to, the positional argument. So based on the position of the variables or parameters, that's what matches this and then gets executed. Okay, so I'll correct this and put a quote. So if you call this function, Sam will be first name here and Paul will be the surname here, and then you get Sam Paul. If you swap it around and you Paul here will be the first name, Sam will be the surname, and you get Paul Sam. So you can try that as well. Then we have something very useful in Python. Okay, my volume is not too loud. All right, how about now? I reduced it earlier because the speaker is picking the noise of my fan on my system. So I think this should be loud enough for you, right? This should be loud enough for you. Okay. So We have here another type of argument you can pass to the function. Actually, two types. You can have non-keyword arguments and then keyword arguments with this notation. The non-keyword, if you put this special symbol, just one star, all right, then you can have a number of arguments, okay, a number of arguments you can pass with just this notation. So you don't need to list them one after the other. We'll soon see an example. And then with your keyword, if you put double star, you can pass a number of keyword arguments. So you see some examples. This can be very useful for your Python function. So for example, here we have the non-keyword arguments, and we are passing a number of them. So it doesn't matter whether it's 1, 2, or more than that. All right. So this function will expect almost like a list of these arguments and then do something with it. All right. So you see here where we call the function display messages, and then we pass 4 different strings. All right. So these 4 different strings will be the same thing as these arguments. All right. So when you see the star, just one star and then a variable name, okay, that means that you're passing multiple arguments to that function, and then you do what you want to do with it. In this case here, you see that we do a loop through the arguments, and then we are printing each of the arguments. Okay, so the output of this program will be hello, hi, good day, Ali, in that order. Okay, now you will notice that the name does not matter. All right, what matters is that the non-keyword argument has 1 star before the name. Okay, so you put 1 star and then the arguments, the name. So it can be arguments, it can be args, it can just be a. All of them would work just fine. Now for your keyword arguments, you use double star. All right, you use double star, and then the name that you would like to use for your variable. Okay, so you use double star and then the name you would like to use for your variable. You will notice here for this display function, when I call it, I have a keyword called first name. It is not here, but I'm declaring it here and using it. So first name, I supply James. So this is the keyword, this is its value. All right, let me say that again. First name is the keyword, James is the value. All right, then we have middle initial here, which is the keyword, the value is I dot. All right, and then surname, which is a keyword, and then Ali, which is its value. So with this, you have the flexibility to define your key and value. All right, you have the flexibility to define your key and value when you use the double star. All right, so we call this keyword arguments. All right, and this display we expect a number of them. So it can be 3, it can be 4, it can be 2, it can be as many as you need it to be. Okay, and then once I get it in the function, I can do a loop through them, so it works almost as if it's a list as well. All right, so for the keyword arguments, the as items, all right, so you access all the items with the dot items function. You can now get the key and the value from that. Okay, so keyword args dot items will give you all of this, and then you can also get the key and value from that. That's why we use the items function. And then you can print a message or do whatever you need to do. You can see here that we have the %s. So I'll explain what this operator does later, but what you just need to know is we're expecting a string here, we're expecting a string here, and the string, we to get it from this key value which is assigned from this keywords.item. All right, so when you run this program, you will get this type of output. So first name equals James, middle initial equals I, surname equals Ali. Why would you want to use keyword args and args? Is because they give you flexibility when you're writing your function. Okay, they give you flexibility. So there are certain times that you'd want to define functions that you have multiple arguments, but you don't know how many arguments will be needed, right? So you will use star if it's keyword arguments, or star for just arguments. All right, so just like with your keyword non-keyword arguments, you need the names is up to you, the variable name, but just make sure you have at least these 2 stars. All right, so star in front of the name of the variable. Okay, so the name can be up to you. Okay, now the other thing that we've not talked about, or we've talked about but not too much, is the docstring. All right, so if you remember from the structure of the Python function we saw last week, we talked about the docstring. A docstring are useful because they can give you the description of what the function does. Okay, so when you are writing your own function, it's good practice for you to supply a docstring. You can use it to document your code, and basically you usually will use it to describe what your function does. Okay, your docstrings are optional in your functions, so they are not necessary if you don't need them or if you don't want them, but it's considered good practice to have them so that you remember what it does, you remember the description of your functions, or other people that you collaborate with that see your code would understand what the function is doing. Okay, there's a way for you to print your docstring. That is to call your function name and then dot, then you put underscore underscore doc underscore underscore. Okay, so this is a keyword in Python. All right, so any function that you define with a docstring, once you call the function name dot and then underscore underscore doc underscore underscore, you can get the name of your so you can get what is stored in your docstring. All right, so let's see an example here. You see here that we have another function, and this time we have a docstring here highlighted in orange. Function to check if the year is a leap year or not. All right, so this is our docstring, and then if you want to print it, you can use the print function, and then the name of our function is what? Leap year dot underscore underscore doc underscore underscore. Right, and then that will print the docstring for us. Function to check if the year is a leap year or not. All right, so this is useful in Python. Sometimes you may want to print your docstring. Okay, if you notice in this function, what I've done here is doing this operator. I'm sure you guys remember this. This is the modulus operator. When we are working with numbers, we think of this as the modulus operator. Okay, so any year we supply here, I'm dividing by 4, and then I'm checking to see what the remainder is. If the remainder is 0, then I'll just conclude that that year is a leap year. Otherwise, I'll conclude that that year is not a leap year. So basically that's what the function does. And of course, like I said before, you can print the docstring using the notation. You call the function name and then a dot and then underscore underscore doc underscore underscore. All right, so that's how you print your docstrings. Python has this interesting thing where you can have a function within a function. All right, so a function within a function. You see here we have two functions. There's f1, then there's f2. All right, both of them have the keyword def in front of them to show that we're defining functions. All right, so inside f1 function we have length, we have width, and then we have another function called f2. All right, and inside f2 we can do something like this. We are printing the length times width. Now we have access to length and width because function 2 is inside function 1, and length and width are described when they are declared inside function 1, so you can use them. Okay, so at the end of the definition of function 2, we're calling it, okay, function 2 here, so that when you call function 1 elsewhere in your program, it would come here, assign length, assign width, then check the function 2 definition and say, oh, length times width, we have to print that, so you get an output of 200. So sometimes you may want to structure your codes like this, but maybe that will be rare for most of you because you may not want to overcomplicate your code by doing function within a function. But just know that in Python it's possible, so sometimes you may see this in some other code that you maybe work with. All right, then we have what we call anonymous functions. So if you've used JavaScript before, you may have come across anonymous function. Basically, an anonymous function is a function that does not have a name. Let me say that again. A function that does not have a name. When a function doesn't have a name, we call it anonymous function. All right, so you see this is our standard declaration of a function. We have the keyword def, the name of the function, and then our brackets with maybe our arguments or parameters, and then what the function does. All right, if you are writing an anonymous function which is similar to this, what you can do is you have a variable, then you assign it, and then you use the keyword lambda. All right, so when Python sees this keyword lambda, it knows that you are trying to declare an anonymous function. So we can have lambda, then you pass your parameters, and then after the colon you write what your function would do. Okay, so this is equivalent of this. This is how you write your normal function in Python. This is how you write an anonymous function. So we know that this function is anonymous because it has the keyword lambda. All right, this function, we know that it is not anonymous because we have the def keyword and then the function name. Now when you call this function, you can call it this way. All right, so you can call it your function name, and then your values, you pass the length and then the width. All right, and that will give you 28 once it comes in here and then does this multiplication and returns the value. All right, so the return value is what we print here as 28. Now for this area 7.4, basically you're using this variable, you're passing 7 and 4, so the lambda would Python will know from this lambda expression that 7 is the length, 4 is the width. It does this multiplication and then assigns 28. All right, so this will also print 28, so you feel free to use any of that. Okay, so I'm seeing a question in the chat by Samuel. You have two questions. Let me see. So the first one you're asking, so K w args, right? Yes, so like I said in the notes earlier, it is not a default name. You can call it anything you want, but for your function to know you are using keyword args, you put the double, star. All right, let me just go back to that slide for your benefit. Okay. All right, so you put double star so that your function knows that it's keyword arguments you're using, but the name, it doesn't matter. It can be keyword kw args, it can be a, it can be args, it can be argument, it can be any other name, so it does not matter. All right, then your next question, in the nested function there is no open and close braces like JavaScript. How would I know that the function f2 is part of function f1? Okay, valid question. So if you remember from what we talked about in the previous classes, Python uses indentation for scope. So if I come back a bit so that you see one of our previous functions, you see that we don't use the curly braces in Python like we use in Java. All right, we use the colon, and then every other thing that is indented, that is this space here, right? These spaces let you know that these things are part of the scope of this leap year function. All right, and the same thing with your if statements and your loops. You have a colon, and then anything that is part of this scope will be indented. All right, so there will be a space to the right. Okay, there will be a space to the right. So print here, this print statement belongs to this if, and here this print statement belongs to this else, and everything inside here with the docstring belongs to this leap year function. That's how the scope works. Then if you check the nested function, is the same thing. All right, is the same thing. So you have your function declaration here, everything here that is indented. All right, there's a space to the right, there's a space, you know that they belong to the f1 function. Okay, so f2, because it's declaration and what is inside it, they are both indented. All right, and they are under this f1. That's how you know that this is a nested function. You know that f2 is inside f1. So I hope that is clear for you, Samuel. Okay, all right, so I think that is clear. All right, so we've talked about anonymous function. You use the lambda, okay, for the anonymous function, and it's similar to your other function. It's just that there's no name and you're using lambda, okay, and then whatever you get, you assign it to a variable. All right, now a very important concept for you to be familiar with in many programming languages, including Python, is this concept of having a recursive function. So a recursive function is a function that calls itself at some point in the definition of the function. So for example, we have this factorial function. All right, your factorial function, so the name of your, let me go back one more step. So the name of your factorial function is factorial, and you need just one number, n. All right, and inside this definition somewhere, you see that we also have a place where we have factorial and we are passing a number. All right, so this function is first declared here. So because it calls itself, we call it recursive function. With your recursive function, You're usually very careful that you don't want it to result to an infinite loop. So you need a situation where the function stops calling itself. Okay, so you find that in most recursive function, you will have what we call a base case. All right, a base case is when a condition is met, then you terminate the whole function. All right, and then you have a recursive case, and inside your recursive case, that's where you keep calling the function over and over and over again. All right, so in this simple recursive function, you can see that we have an if statement, all right, and then an else statement. So this if part forms our base case. Basically, when n equals 0, we'll return 1, and that's the end of the function. Otherwise, if it comes to our else statement, we now do our recursive state, which is the return of n multiplied by factorial of a number less than n. Okay, so this will keep going. So we are hoping that at some point n will equal 0, and then we can end the call. We'll stop calling factorial. Okay, this function is quite useful. So if you print factorial of 8, you will get something like this. So you can try it and print the factorial of any other number, so you see what it does. Okay, so sometimes instead of writing a for loop or while loop, you may want to write a recursive statement, but just take note that when you are writing this, you need to have provision for your base case. Okay, and the condition has to be met so that your function stops. All right, because you don't want to result to an infinite function. So I think with all of that, we should be okay to write different types of functions in the type of programs that we'll be writing. Okay, so now we're going to talk about something else that is very important with Python, which is the manipulation of strings. Okay, so we'll look at what strings are, the concept of substrings, and then some other operators that we use with the strings. Okay, so in Python, your strings, you can declare them with either double quotes or with single quotes. It doesn't matter. Python doesn't really have the character type like some languages like C. They will have character as a type, data type. In Python, they are all strings. So whether it's A, just one character with quotes, single or double quote, it's a string. Whether it's a phone number, you think of it as a string. And then whether it's something like this, okay, you see it also as a string. So how you know string literals is that you see quotes, all right? Whether it's single quotes or double quotes, you know that you are dealing with a string, all right? All right, so your strings, they usually have length, all right? How many characters form your string? That will determine your string length. Okay, so in this example here, we have address that stores this long string here: Bauchi Road Campus, comma, Plateau State, comma, Nigeria. This is a string, and we store it inside address. Okay, so just like how your list variable type, you can access each index using the square brackets. It's the same thing for your string as well. So if you print address and then you supply 0 to the square bracket, you're going to get the first element in the string. So you can think of your string as a list of characters. Let me say that again. You can think of your string as a list of characters. All right, good. So when you print this first address with index 0, you are printing the index 0 of address. You will get B as the output. Okay, And then you can also do what we call splicing, which is that you get a part of the string, a chunk or section of the string. Okay, we call that splicing in Python. And you use this colon to do that. So when you supply the first position and then the colon and then the where it stops, the final index, you get something like this. Okay, so looking at this example now, we are printing address 1:5. All right, address 1:5. So if you remember, this one here is the starting index, and remember, just like your list, your string also starts from 0. So 0 and then 1, that means 1 here is what? A. All right, then we have 2, 3, 4, but it does not print what is in 5. Okay, so it stops at index 5 but does not include index 5 to the splice or to the substring. All right, so address 1:5 will give you from 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's why you get something like this when you print it out. Okay, if you want to print the substring road inside this address, I've given you an example of how to do that. So you have to count to where the starting position of this R is, and then all the way to 1 plus the index of D. Okay, so that's where you stop. So that will give you road. All right. Okay, so another way. Okay, I think that's fine. Okay, now there's we have some characters, some escape characters that we use with strings in Python. You may have seen them in other languages like Java. All right, where you see /r/t, they mean something in programming. Okay, so inside this string, you see Bauchi Road Campus, comma, /r, then Plateau State, comma, /r/t, Nigeria. When you print that, the escape character /r/t actually do something to the string. So when you print it, you will see the message will be like this. Okay, Bauchi Road Campus will be on one line. Then because of this should be on another line. Because of this, on another line, and because of the /t, we have a tab. Okay, so that's how escape characters work. Okay, so when you are doing your string operations, like I said before, the brackets will allow us to do a splice. Okay, so you can get the character of a string by supplying an index, and then when you have the colon, we can now do the range splice. Okay, so when we have the colon inside the bracket, you can do what we call a range splice. Okay, and then you've seen an example from the previous slides with the address string that we were working with. Then you can do what we call concatenation of string, that is joining or combining two strings together using the plus. We use plus to combine two strings together. So just like with numbers, you use plus to add two numbers. All right, when you use plus for strings, you're adding two strings. But remember, in Python, you don't want to add a string and a number. That will give you an error. So be very cautious of the data types you are working with. Now we have two variables here. One is green, one is apple. When we use plus, so we are printing variable 1 plus variable 2, you get green apple. Okay, without any space, because we didn't add any space. You can try that out and see. We also have this star that you use for multiplication. you can use it also with string. All right, so it will help you to do repetition. All right, repeat. So if you do, let's say our variable is green, all right, and you call the variable and you multiply it by 3, you get green 3 times. If you multiply it by 4, you get green 4 times. So you can this can come in handy if you want to repeat certain characters. So if you want to repeat maybe underscore 5 times or 10 times or 15 times, or maybe a hyphen or x 15 times, you just do the string x multiplied by 15, or the string hyphen multiplied by 15. All right, so you can use that even as you draw your, as you do attempt your assignment, the hangman assignment, to draw the gallows. All right, so that also can help you, this star for repetition of strings. Okay, so we have these keywords in and then not in. Okay, so basically they can help us to check if a character is in a string or not. For example, here we have address again, and then we're going to check if a substring is inside this address. All right, so you can try that and see what you get. All right, the substring here is the Bauchi. Okay, so if Bauchi is inside the address, you print it. All right, so when you print it, you see what you get. All right, so okay, then we have this percentage here. Like I said earlier that I was going to explain what this is. One second, please. Okay, so we have here this percentage. Okay, it helps us to do string formatting. So sometimes when you want to pass some variables into a string or a message that you already have, it's useful for you to use the percentage. So you've already seen where we use the string interpolation with the F string. Now we are using the percent. Okay, percent. So when you say %s, you are referring to another string, and then when you use %d, you are referring to an integer. Likewise, you can use %f to refer to a floating point number. All right, so if, for example, I want to pass these two variables inside a message, all right, I can print my name is %s and I am %d years old. Okay, so here we are expecting a string, and here we are expecting an integer. All right, then you use another %, and then you pass the variables for each of those. Okay, so this Aisha here will be replaced by would replace this %s, and 21 here will replace %d. Okay, so that your message becomes, my name is Aisha and I am 21 years old. My name is Aisha and I am 21 years old. Okay, so you can think of %s, %d as placeholders. All right, so %s, %d, they are your placeholders. Good. Now we have this inbuilt function for strings called split. This inbuilt function for strings is called split. So address equals Bauchi Road, Campus, Plateau State, Nigeria. If you want to, you notice that we have some commas here. If you want to split by comma, you will get an array. You will get an array of what? Of substrings. Okay, so Bauchi Road Campus, all right, Plateau State, Nigeria. Okay, Bauchi Road Campus, Plateau State, Nigeria. So because we split by comma, you can also split by space, in which case you may get Bauchi Road Campus, Plateau State, Nigeria. All right. So you get a list of those words. Sometimes, for those of you that intend to do things like machine learning or data science in the future, right? When you have this type of, you may come across situation where you have strings that are separated by this pipe. Okay, so when you come across such data, they can be in CSV format or Excel, and they will be separated by this pipe. You can do a split of that to get the values. Okay, so that will be useful for you when you are doing machine learning projects or data science projects. All right, you use the split. Now when you use the split, what you get is an array. Okay, an array formed by the result of the split. Okay, so in this case, when you do address.split by this pipe, you get Nigeria, Plateau State, Just North, Bauchi Road Campus, all in one array. Now if you because it's an array, you can get each of the index of that array using the square brackets and then the index number you're interested in. All right, so Bauchi Road Campus, we give you the fourth one. Okay, so you can try that out to see what you get. Then we have this example here. When you split the string, okay, address.split, there's this inbuilt function in Python that lets you get the type of a variable. All right, so if you want to know the type of component after doing this, just print type and then component. So type is a function, an inbuilt Python function that lets you get the type of any variable. So if you see variables you're not sure of, what type they are, use the type function. All right, so if you come across certain codes, Python, you don't need to declare the type of your variables, right? So you may come across certain functions and methods that you don't know what type they are. You just use the type variable. For those variables, it will tell you what they are. Then we have length. Len is a keyword to let you get the length of an element. Okay, so len of this component will give you the length of the component. You can print the component as well, and then you can access any member of the component. So you should get something like this once you print it. So your components, when you print the type, you should get class list, so you know that that is a list type. All right, that is a list. Okay. All right, so you will notice inside this this array, we have empty quotation, and then we have Nigeria, Plateau State, Just North, Bauchi Road Campus, then another empty quotation. So you have to be careful, because if you look at this, you see that pipe started at the beginning here, and pipe is placed here at the end of the string. So when you do the split, it's going to take, because it started from the beginning, it's going to put empty quotes and then to put Nigeria next, okay, because it's splitting what is between pipe. So there's empty quotes between this pipe and Nigeria. All right, so in between Nigeria and the empty quotes, there's a pipe. In between Nigeria and Plateau State, there's another pipe. In between Plateau State and Jos North, there's another pipe. Likewise here, Bauchi Road Campus, and then you have a pipe. It will assume that there's another empty quotes here. Okay, so it's something you have to keep in mind, so that when you are trying to access maybe one of these, you don't use the wrong index. So for example, the index of Nigeria is 0, so that's what you will use. But if you look at it from here and you do the split, you may think that the index is 1. No, it's not 1. There's a space in between. There's a space here, and then there's a pipe, then there's Nigeria. All right. So I think this is where we'll end the class for today. You've seen functions, and with this we've covered all the things we need to know about functions for you to write your own functions. And then we've also seen the what do you call it now, the strings, the different things you can do with strings in Python. So string manipulation is very common and useful for your Python programs, so I advise you to try some of that in your spare time as well. All right, so do we have any questions before I close the session? So if you have any questions, you can still write in the chat. So since there are no questions, I think we can end the lectures here. I'll share the notes with your class rep, and then he would forward it to your group. And then I'm sure some of these things that we've seen will also help you with your assignment as well. And I think I'll expect to see your assignment by Wednesday next week. Okay, so thank you guys for joining the lecture. I wish you all a good evening.